Devil Never Cry.
What is up everyone, it is me Devil Never Cry, and in today's video we'll be reviewing Octopath Traveler 2. Thanks to some very kind folks over at Square Enix, I've had an early copy of Octopath Traveler 2 on the PS5, allowing me to get stuck in, collate my thoughts and essentially bring this video to you on release day. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Being somebody who picked up the original Octopath Traveler on release day, and someone who thoroughly enjoyed my time with that game, I was very much looking forward to Octopath Traveler 2. At the same time though, I was curious to see what sort of changes they'd bring with the sequel, and whether or not these changes made the game better or worse than the original. For those of you who didn't play the original Octopath Traveler, Octopath Traveler 2 follows in almost exactly the same footsteps. It's a turn-based JRPG set inside a HD 2D world, which is a fusion of retro pixel art, as you can see, and 3D environments. And it is absolutely gorgeous. The first game looked immaculate, this game looks even better, thanks to the attention to detail and the dynamic camera that they have in certain scenes, makes this game look absolutely stunning. I'd consider this game the ultimate throwback to old school JRPGs, and that's not just because of the graphics. We'll be getting onto more of why I think that in just a second. But for context, this game takes place in the world of Celestia, a world that is essentially divided into two land masses, two large continents, allowing you to pick and choose a journey from one of 8 different protagonists. As the name Octopath blatantly implies, yes, there are 8 characters to choose from, and that initial choice can be quite daunting. However, just like the original Octopath Traveler, you will indeed be able to stumble upon each and every protagonist you didn't choose out there in the world map, allowing you to see their stories from start to finish, and of course, adding them to your party, allowing you to take on wave after wave of random encounters or the new crossed paths scenarios that they've added into Octopath Traveler 2, along with a myriad of other side quests. Of course, there is an overarching plot very similar to the original Octopath, which I won't essentially spoil here, but it works very much the same way in that you need to see everybody's stories to their natural conclusion before you're able to tackle the climax of Octopath Traveler 2. The best thing about this narrative approach, of course, is that again you are able to tackle whichever story you want to first. Perhaps you like some of the characters more than the others, perhaps their narrative resonates more with you and you're more interested in seeing their conclusion first. You're able to go out there and do so before tackling anybody else's. Though as I previously mentioned, this is a very old school JRPG in that you'll need to grind at certain moments. This particularly comes into play when you're going about your way trying to clear certain chapters for certain characters. The game will give you a recommended level, which oftentimes will be far above what you're currently at, and that essentially is a recommended level that would allow you to clear that chapter quite comfortably. Of course, you're able to tackle the chapter at any given point, but you will be in for a very punishing time if you are significantly below the level that they recommend. Having said that, let's talk about the combat and some of the additions and changes that they've made when compared to the first game. Much like the first game, Octopath Traveler 2 also features a turn-based combat system where you control a party of 4. The enemy shield and weakness mechanics from the original Octopath also return in the sequel, wherein by hitting an enemy with their weakness a certain number of times will break their shield, leaving them vulnerable to multiple attacks. The boost system also returns, allowing you to strategically store up extra hits or even extra damaging attacks, allowing you to coincide them with the break system to maximize the amount of damage you can do to enemies. A new addition to combat, however, is the latent power mechanic. Each of the 8 characters has their own individual latent power that you can take advantage of to help you turn the tide of battle. For example, Throne's latent power allows her to act twice in a row, giving her essentially an extra turn, whereas somebody like Hikari, his latent power allows him to take advantage of a myriad of super secret special moves without using any SP or special points at all. The mechanic itself adds another layer of strategy to Octopath Traveler 2's combat, and it's another mechanic that you'll need to be thinking of whenever you're laying out a strategy for a particular enemy or boss. And again, going back to the phrase old school, strategizing is something you'll definitely need to do if you want to get to the end of Octopath Traveler 2. Much like the original game, this isn't a game that is very forgiving in that if you don't think about the actions you take in combat, if you don't actively make note and make use of weaknesses and make use of the break and boost mechanic to break enemies before they hit you with powerful attacks and maximize the damage you do on enemies when they're broken, you're going to be in for a very, very rough ride. It's very unforgiving in an old school way. But provided you have an adequately leveled team for whatever enemy you're facing, and your team is balanced in that it can take advantage of most weaknesses, you shouldn't have too much trouble. The job system that most Octopath and, to be honest, JRPG fans know and love also returns in the sequel. Each character has their own initial job that they start their journey out with, and through mysterious means that I won't quite spoil, they'll also be able to pick up a secondary job. And it is through these jobs that characters are able to acquire skills through the use of JP. Though something new in Octopath Traveler 2 is the inclusion of EX skills. These are special skills that are definitely worth acquiring, though you'll need to figure out how, as you won't simply be able to buy them outright with JP or job points. Pressing ahead, there's another new feature that I briefly want to talk about, and that is the day and night system. With a simple press of a button in Octopath Traveler 2 throughout the majority of the game, barring a few exceptions, you'll be able to change the game from day to night and vice versa. Far from just an aesthetic change, there are a few differences between day and night that you'll want to make note of. When you're out in the overworld and in dungeons, in between cities, you'll essentially come across different, tougher enemies. This of course is useful when you're grinding out levels. When you're inside a city or a town, however, and you change from day to night and vice versa, the locations of NPCs will change depending on the time of day. This directly ties into the path action system, which they've altered slightly in Octopath Traveler 2. For those that didn't play the original Octopath Traveler, path actions are essentially unique skills that each and every character can use outside of combat. The change they've made in the sequel here is that characters now have access to 2 path actions that vary depending on the time of day. As an example, during the day, Throne the Thief can mug NPCs for the items they have, with a percentage chance of success of course. But during the night, Throne is able to ambush NPCs, essentially knocking them out cold. This addition to the path action system is definitely something that you'll need to think about more often, especially if you're going to be tackling the side stories in the cities and towns of Celestia. It also means you'll need to think about which characters you have in your party, as each path action is uniquely tied to a specific character. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Octopath Traveler 2, and that's coming from somebody who enjoyed the first game as well. Sure, there were a few stories, characters, and narratives that I enjoyed more than others, but ultimately I think they did a good job of rounding out the cast and making them just different enough from the original cast to make it feel like we weren't retreading ground. I also feel that if you're a JRPG fan that somehow missed out on the first Octopath Traveler, that there's enough quality of life changes here in the sequel that it is a worthwhile place to start. On the flip side of that coin, however, if perhaps you didn't like the first Octopath Traveler, or perhaps you did but were hoping that they'd make some radical changes to the sequel, this game unfortunately may not be for you. And that about does it for this video. Let me know down in the comments below which character you're starting your Octopath Traveler journey with. I started with Throne this time around. I also started with Therion in the first game. Clearly I have something for the Thief class. And with all that said and done, it has been me, Devil Never Cry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.